The West Virginia Mountaineers are not the only team in the Big 12 bringing back an old football coach. The UCF Knights are doing the same thing with Scott Frost. And in this episode, which is brought to you by BetUS Online and Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner Attorneys at Law, we're going to talk about that with a very special guest, and we're going to have that conversation with that guest right after this. Since 1931, the attorneys at Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident or fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. What is up, and welcome into this episode of Couz's Corner. On tap today, we're talking about the UCF Knights and what I like to call the Big 12 Spotlight. This is a series I've started where I'm going to go over every Big 12 team. My plan is to do one team a week. Last week, we touched on the Texas Tech Red Raiders and the success they're seeing in the portal. And this week, we're going to talk about the UCF Knights, another team who has seen quite a bit of success in the portal heading into the 2025 college football season. And they, just like West Virginia, are bringing back a former coach to take over the program. And to talk about that, we're going to bring on a very special guest who covers the UCF Knights, the one and only Adam from the Sons of UCF. Adam, how you doing today?
Couz, my friend, good to see you again. Thanks for having me back on the show.
Absolutely. Good to see you again, and thank you for coming back on the show. I was afraid after the first time you wouldn't want to come back.
No, I love the stuff you do. I love the stuff you put out for West Virginia. So happy to talk a little ball. It's never too early to talk some football, Couz.
Never. It's a year-round sport anymore, right?
Yeah, no, it's got to be, right? Especially with the transfer portal. And I know our schools are going through some similar stuff with coaching changes and whatnot. So every day there's something new to talk about. So excited to be back on the program.
Absolutely. Let's just go ahead and start off there. UCF brings back Scott Frost to replace Gus Malzahn, who decided to leave and go to Florida State to become the offensive coordinator. First of all, was it a shock to UCF fans when that happened, when Malzahn left? And then once you talk about that, go ahead and talk about, the process of bringing Frost back in and just how the fan base feels about that and how you felt about it too, personally. And just that whole vibe and feeling around the program.
Yeah, I'll start with Gus. So I think it was a surprise he was gone, but not for the reasons I think people think. So if you followed UCF closely, a disappointing season, 4-8, and the wheels were really coming off towards the end. We played 4 quarterbacks in 2024, couldn't quite find a starter, whiffed on KJ Jefferson. Things were getting really bad, and so the tenor around UCF was maybe this is not for Gus anymore. Maybe we've got to move on. But UCF is not a school that is just flowing with cash right now. And so to buy Gus out, I think we would have cost us somewhere in like the $12 to $13 million neighborhood, which nobody thought UCF had. And I don't even think UCF frankly had it, right? So it almost felt like resigned to the next step of like, I guess we're stuck with Gus. I guess he's going to be here. We can't afford $12 million. Who's going to take him as a head coach right now? He says he's not retiring. So I think a lot of fans were just kind of apoplectic that Gus is back for another year and we're going to deal what we deal with. So the surprise was, yes, that he was leaving. The bigger surprise was he was going to Florida State as an offensive coordinator. Personally, Couz, like I had to check my phone like 3 times to make sure I wasn't getting like tricked by the internet and this wasn't like a fake Adam Schefter account or something. Because I think that was the surprise that Gus would take a step down and go to Florida State. So we're surprised all across the board because just no one thought he'd walk away from $12 million. Nobody thought he would just leave and sort of get out of town. But he was, I guess, as frustrated as fans and administrators were and decided to jump to a clean break. And, he obviously has a relationship with Mike Norvell from their days at Tulsa, a little bit of Florida State ties with some coaches like Kenny Dillingham who've worked for both. So I guess he found a soft landing spot. So folks were disappointed that he was staying initially, then shocked that he actually left. And then all of a sudden you start celebrating, hey, we didn't pay him a buyout. We don't owe anybody any money. Like, it almost seemed like a really clean break. I hate to use this pun, Couz, but scot-free, if you will, that Gus Malzahn goes to Florida State. So then the question comes, who's next, right? Who's the next coach? And listen, when these coach openings happen, everybody's name is thrown out there. Agents position their guy to a spot, right? Boosters say they want somebody, players say they want somebody. I mean, there were a handful of names, and kind of, it took about a week from the process, but midweek, the names that seemed to be circulating the most were Jamie Chadwell at Liberty, Barry Odom at UNLV. And then you start to hear a little bit about Scott Frost, a little bit about his name coming up. I had a source tell me that UCF absolutely had already had conversations with Frost earlier in the week, and that he was somebody that shouldn't be discounted. One thing I can tell you, and this wasn't really widely reported, but some sources and folks that I've talked to, Scott Frost almost came back to UCF in 2 years prior. We had an offensive coordinator opening position, and there were some conversations about Frost coming back at that point to be Gus's OC. Wow. Those conversations didn't materialize. I think, cooler heads prevailed and realized that those two personalities probably wouldn't fit well together. But Frost made a good impression on UCF administrators, who are all new, by the way, from the last time Frost was here, that they said, hey, this is a guy we need to talk to. So all of a sudden his name just kept coming up. And by the end of the week, his name was still out there. And it kind of became like, all right, well, Chadwell said no. Odom's kind of doing this thing. GJ Kinney re-signed to Texas State. All the names we'd heard about, started crossing off the list. And at some point you were like, wait a minute. Really, the only name left is Scott Frost. And then things happen quickly. You hear about interviews, conversations. And so, by that Saturday afternoon, that Sunday, Scott Frost is standing back in Orlando again in front of a podium with UCF logo, which is just surreal to imagine, because 6 seasons earlier, he leaves UCF at the height of UCF and goes to Nebraska, and fans are a little bit upset and a little bit mad about the way it all went down. And here he is now, kind of being welcomed back with open arms. It was a surreal moment to see how things kind of transpired over the 6 years, but how we got back to Scott Frost 2.0, which to your larger question, fans are ecstatic. Fans are ecstatic right now. They're ecstatic about him coming back. I think you can dip into the nostalgia pool a little bit and say, okay, can he kind of rekindle the magic there? But so far, fans are ecstatic that they love having him back. He feels like a more natural fit at UCF, I think, than maybe even he did in Nebraska. And so we haven't played a down of football yet, Couz. I haven't seen anybody throw the pigskin in the air under Scott Frost, but people are super happy that he's back at UCF and excited about the season.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And again, we're talking with Adam from Sons of UCF podcast. Find him on YouTube and all the audio only platforms out there, whether it's Spotify, Apple. I'm assuming you're on most of them. Is that correct, Adam?
You name them, Couz, you can find us on there.
Awesome. So check out their work. They do a great job, he and his team, covering UCF. But do you think Gus leaving, back to that for a second, because something puzzled me. Do you think it was just him not liking the direction the sport was going, and he just wanted to take a step back from being a head coach and just coach ball and focus on calling an offense?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. If you listen to Gus throughout the year, the vibes that we were all picking up on as a fan base was that he might retire, because he keeps talking about the new era of college football, this age of college football. I'm an old high school coach. You could tell he was kind of longing for a time that's long since past us. And I think that's where everybody thought the retirement rumors started to really circulate. Like, he sounds like a guy who's sick of staying at this podium and talking about football. He's made a lot of money. He's a little older in life. Maybe this is his time to walk away. And really what we misdiagnosed was all that stuff was true, Couz, except he just wanted to coach ball. Yeah. He didn't want to deal with portal. He didn't want to deal with, some kids' parents who don't like that he's not playing as much. He didn't want to deal with transfers and what you're signing guys up for an NIL. He didn't want to deal with re-recruiting your players every year. Now, to be fair, he's still going to have to do some of that. So maybe he's not doing all the calculations on that piece.
Right.
But I think you're absolutely right. I think he just says to himself, I'm an old X's and O's high school ball coach. I want to coach some ball. I want to go run some offense and not worry about that stuff. And I think he found a safe landing spot in Mike Norvell, again, who he'd had a previous relationship with.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously I'm an outsider, so I look at this as being best for both sides, right? You get Gus, who now can be happy coaching ball, doing what he loves to do, still around the game. And then you get, for UCF side, you get back the nostalgia piece, which I can obviously relate to with Rich Rod coming back. The coach who's taken UCF to the peak of their success, which again, same thing with us basically here at West Virginia, and hopefully win some football games, right? And just bring that. There's just there's always an excitement when you have somebody new at the helm anyway.
Yeah.
But when you have the nostalgia that goes along with it, to me, it just adds fuel the fire, so to speak.
And I think
Stokes the fan base's fire a little bit more.
Yeah, not to cut you off. I think Gus even actually maybe went a little bit on this one because here's two things. One, he traveled right up the road to Tallahassee. I mean, that's a 2.5 hour drive from Orlando. So all the same recruits he had on his mind in Orlando, he could literally just call him like, hey, just drive a little further north, 2.5 hours, right?
Yeah.
So he got a bunch of guys from UCF in the portal that committed to Florida State. A couple of recruits that were on UCF's radar go to Florida State. He knows our NIL situation. He knows everything about the program. So in-state recruiting, which is huge, he now has a bit of a leg up because he can tell a recruit, hey, you want to go to UCF? I can tell you all about that. Like, here's what we have at Florida State. So early returns is he's done if you're a Florida State fan, he's done a nice job of finding the talent at UCF, getting them to come up to Tallahassee. So he's got a bit of a leg up in that sense that he's already built his relationships. It's not like he's going to Texas or Tennessee or Wisconsin where he's got to rebuild some relationships. He already has those. So Mike Norvell, it's a real smart move to say, let me get the guy who was winning some recruiting battles and just bring him on my staff, pay him whatever I got to pay him as a coordinator and win some of those. So I think Malzahn actually made a really heady play getting out to Florida State and starting over there.
Yeah, I bet that doesn't sit too well. I hadn't thought about that angle there. I bet that doesn't sit too well with UCF fans, if I had to guess.
It's tough, man, because with the portal these days, kids are going everywhere, right? Like it's so hard to really get mad anymore. We're at the UCF lane. We just got a video released the other day from Dylan Gabriel, who folks remember was UCF starting quarterback a long time ago, three schools ago. He was at UCF, and he put a video out, and it was him and all the schools he'd been at. And I remember when he left, everyone was just really pissed off at him, right? How could you do this? But 5 years later, it's the norm. So I think some guys are like, look, if you want to go to Florida State and you want to play in Gus's offense, feel free if that's what you think is right for you. I think UCF fans saw enough of that offensive system to basically tip their cap to guys who are leaving and say, best of luck to you. If you can thrive in that offense, go thrive in that offense. And so I think some of that's softened. But yeah, it's been a little bit of that guy's going to Florida State, or as soon as some guy hits the portal, we're all like, well, Florida State bound, I guess. Yeah. And a lot of times, unfortunately, that's been correct.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I had not totally even thought about that angle, but you're right. Just a few hours up the road. Definitely a huge advantage for him in recruiting. Before we jump in, that's a perfect segue to the portal discussion, which I do want to get to here. Before we do that, though, I have to give another shout out to my other sponsor here, BetUS Online. If you're looking for a brand new sports book, look no further than our friends over at BetUS. Right now, they have a very special offer. On your very first deposit, you got a 150% sign-up bonus with promo code YouTube150. Again, promo code YouTube150 gets you a 150% sign-up bonus at BetUS. You can also get 125% on your next two deposits, up to a grand total of $2,000. Please be sure to play responsibly. And remember, you must be 18 years of age or older to play. Now, Adam, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the transfer portal, man. I was looking at the portal rankings there. Looks like UCF's doing a pretty good job. You've got 24/7 has them as the third highest rated team in the Big 12. Rivals actually has them at number 1, and then On 3 has them at number 7 in the Big 12. Which when I was looking at, talking about West Virginia's transfers the other day, and these rankings are all over the map, man. It looks like each, depending on which company, which publication you look at, they all do it differently. So, but overall, I get the sense that UCF's had a pretty successful class. What's the overall thoughts on this transfer portal class for UCF as far as what they lost versus what they brought in, and who are some of the big time gets?
Yeah, 28 kids in this class right now, Couz, and to your point, some of the sites, depending on how many kids you have, you get ranked higher and so on and so forth. So there's probably some noise in those rankings. I think for UCF was as interesting as this portal class under Scott Frost is a completely different shape and form of what you saw under Gus Malzahn. This is, again, no disrespect to Gus Malzahn, but under Malzahn, it seemed, though, there was an emphasis on going after SEC talent, guys who had played at SEC schools, even if they didn't play a lot, but guys who had a lot of stars to their name, maybe hadn't gotten the field a lot, some big name guys to say, hey, we got a guy from Clemson, we got a guy from, Alabama, right? That worked out a little bit for UCF, but I think there was a hesitancy at times to go after the big name kid. You look at this roster right here that Scott Frost has gotten. Oklahoma is maybe one of the biggest schools on here. Ole Miss, there's a recruit from you don't. This is not littered with SEC talent. This is littered with, I think, specific need talent. And I think the two things that Frost did that's interesting is Malzahn was great for the 1 year rental. We'd get a guy with 1 year left, a la KJ Jefferson, who gets paid a hefty sum in the NIL game, but has nothing really to play for at that point, right? And so a lot of the guys, I want to say, I did the math recently. I want to say over 20 to 22 of these guys have multiple years left. So Frost is trying to find guys that he can bring in and develop, have some time under the system to kind of build and acclimate to the program. So you saw a completely different shift just in terms of the strategy behind how this is going to work. You talked about names. I mean, everyone goes quarterback, right? So Taven Jackson, quarterback, previously at Tennessee, then Indiana, was allegedly going to be their starter this season. They went into the portal, got somebody. He hops in the portal, comes down to UCF. You would seem to think he would fit that Scott Frost offense, right? Where your quarterback's a little bit mobile, but a bit of a zone read game. So that's a big get for UCF. Tight end Dylan Wade from Maryland. Big kid, a Florida kid, comes back to UCF. UCF lost a lot of talent in the transfer portal. Wade's a big kid, catches the ball over the middle, something that we hadn't seen a lot under Malzahn, but was a staple in the Frost offense. Jaden Nixon from Western Michigan, a solid running back. I mean, he was the top running back in the MAC in terms of yards. Again, not a huge name, but a guy that certainly has some ability there. Jaden Bellamy, defensive back from Syracuse, 3-year starter at Syracuse. He had a really good year this last year. Syracuse was sneaky good defensively. And so a local kid wants to get back to Florida, so he comes to Florida as well. And then a name people are going to laugh at, but Cole Kozlowski, who's a linebacker from Colgate. Yes, I said Colgate. Was basically like, all first team in his conference for 3 seasons, 100 plus tackles every year. Kid just runs and flies to the football. Again, not a big name, not somebody from a big school, but somebody with a high motor. I think that fits the offense. So you can already tell Frost is going really, I think, for guys that fit a mold for him, who fit a certain profile he's looking for, not where you played last, how many stars you had, what schools were recruiting you, but rather, do you fit my system now? Do you fit my protocol now? I think it's done a nice job of getting a mix of guys with some talent who maybe haven't had a chance to play yet. This is going to be awkward, Couz, but Day Farmer, who was at West Virginia, comes to UCF. He didn't play a ton for you all last year. We don't know if he's a good receiver or not, but he's got a ton of talent.
Yeah.
So take a flyer on him, see if you can develop him. But then you get a guy like Dylan Wade, who's played a ton of football already, is already there. So I think Frost did a nice job of mixing in some young guys with talent that you say, can we develop these players? And some guys that fit some immediate needs and fit the mold right now. Again, Malzahn seemed to be very focused on how can I win tomorrow? Who are the guys I can get that are going to help me win tomorrow? And when you whiff on those, you whiff badly, because then you deplete your ability to have a solid roster. You can tell Frost is building this from the bottom up, where I think Malzahn just tried to layer on top of some talent there and hope that he would win that way.
Yeah. Interesting. That I see a lot of parallels with what Rich Rod's doing at West Virginia as well, with bringing in guys, a mixture of some power 4 guys who weren't starters, maybe even have had injury issues throughout their career. And he's blending that with a lot of G5 FCS guys who were not just good, but, all conference level guys in a lot of cases at the lower levels. And to the UCF fans, I don't know if I guess every fan base is like this, but West Virginia fans, not all of them, but a large portion of them, get upset because they think there are too many guys from lower levels, which means they're not going to be able to play at the Power 4 level. Do you get that with UCF fans too, or is that not as much?
A couple of years ago, we got that Couz a lot, but I think the Gus Malzahn experience has changed the way people think about that. I'll give you a great example. 2 years ago, we brought in 3 linebackers. One kid from Isaiah Paul from Washington Huskies, Ryan Davis from Georgia, Jordan Johnson from Eastern Illinois, and Walter Yates III from, I think, Middle Tennessee or something like that, right? Davis and Paul were busts. And Johnson and Yates led the team in tackles year over year, 2 straight years in a row from FCS levels. And I think we realized at that point, sometimes the kids are a little hungrier. They have something to prove. They have a chip on their shoulder. And I think that's what helps UCF form that out. But Scott Frost was very upfront in his opening press conference. And I'm sure we'll get into his background a little bit. But look, things did not go well in Nebraska, right? I mean, there was disappointment in the way that worked out. So much so that people thought maybe he was done coaching with how badly that went and some of the things that were going there, that he may never coach again. He may just be a career assistant or go retire into the sunset. He came back to UCF, and one of the things he said at his press conference is, I have a chip on my shoulder. and I'm looking for guys that have chips on their shoulders too, because we're gonna do this thing together. And so you can see a little bit of that DNA where he's trying to find a guy who maybe got overlooked, maybe didn't get that P4 offer, maybe didn't get that call from the school they wanted in the portal, and UCF comes and sees something in me, and so we're going to tap into that and we're going to develop you that way. So I think 2 years ago, if you asked UCF fans that question, oh, same thing. Why are we going to the FCS? And why do I have somebody from Western Michigan? And what the hell's Colgate? I thought that was a toothpaste.
Yeah.
But now I think they look at it and go, wait a minute, like if these dudes can play, then we're good with them here at UCF.
And you have to trust. The conversation I keep telling people is, listen, Neil Brown did the same thing, but he didn't have success with it. So I think that has some fans a little bit gun shy, so to speak, about bringing in the lower level guys. But let's look at it. He had some higher level guys that didn't pan out either. So I don't think it was a matter of what level they came from. It was just a matter of A, were they not a fit? B, did they not get developed right? Maybe they just weren't as good. Maybe they just misevaluated. It could be a ton of different reasons, right? And I keep telling fans, listen, yes, it may have not have worked with Neil Brown because we had 6 years of his track record to show that he wasn't, whatever he was doing wasn't working. With Rich Rod, I mean, without going back, 17 years, you could just say, look, let's give him a chance to prove he knows what he's doing in this era, right? He did it at Jacksonville State. Yes, it's a lower level, but he still had to rebuild a roster. It's still relative, right? To the level he's playing at.
It's the same argument with star rankings, right? Like you look at, and I don't know West Virginia's history as well, obviously, but you look at UCF and some of the biggest names that have come out of UCF. We're not a school that got 4 or 5 star guys.
Right.
We're a school that got 2, 3 star guys. Like Dylan Gabriel mentioned earlier, he was a 2.5 star recruit when he committed to UCF, and now he's at the Heisman Trophy ceremony. He's going to be a pick in the NFL draft. He's made a ton of money, right? Mackenzie Milton, who was a legend at UCF, was a 3-star quarterback. Brandon Marshall, a legend at UCF, a 2-star wide receiver. Josh Sitton, a Hall of Famer in the NFL, was a 2-star offensive lineman. So UCF's kind of built themselves on sort of doing more with less. And so I do think there's an element of that where UCF fans have seen that. But the reality is with every fan base, and I'm sure you all go through it as well, you got the new fans who are just spoiled by, oh, well, we won such and such games so long ago, so we should always be that same level. I say this in jest a lot to folks on our show, and I don't really mean it, but I kind of do mean it. In some ways, Couz, that 2017 13-0 season for UCF is one of the worst things that ever happened because the bar is at that level now. So if you're 12-1, if you're 10-2, like, well, we're not undefeated. Everything is now to that standard. And so while it was a great ride and it's a great history moment for UCF and certainly something we're all proud of, it clouds judgment at times. And you're not going to be 13-0 every year. You may be 9-4, you may be 10-3, and those are still darn good years in college football in a lot of ways. But you get spoiled when you have a lot of success, and a lot of the newer fans at UCF, I think, are dealing with some of that stuff right now.
Yeah. Well, and same thing with I hate to keep bringing it back to West Virginia, but there's so many similarities here.
Yeah.
With West Virginia, I mean, you look at West Virginia has less than 10 double-digit win seasons in their history, right? I mean, they're the 15th winningest program of all time, so they've had a good history, but most of that was late, 8, 9 win seasons, right? And there are some 10 and 11 win seasons sprinkled in there. 88 when they played for the national title, for example, is one of those. But 3 of those were under Rich Rodriguez in 05, 06, and 07. We had 3, and I think that spoiled us as a fan base a little bit because now, and here's the thing, a lot of fans are going to look at Rich Rod now, and they're, okay, he's going to come in and win 10, 11 games again. Well, let's pump the brakes. We weren't in the Big 12 then, number one.
Sure.
Number two, it's a totally different era. The portal, NIL, none of that existed then. But at the same time, he's still the same coach. He can still do more with less, like UCF. West Virginia comes from that same mold. They have to get 2 and 3 star guys and build them into 4 and 5 star guys. Rich Rod did that when he was at West Virginia. He was also really good at finding guys who may have been under recruited. Owen Schmidt, for example, guy who played several years in the NFL as a fullback, was a walk-on at West Virginia. At White, nobody wanted him to play quarterback. Everybody wanted him to play defensive back. Rich Rod said, I can make you a quarterback. And darn if he didn't. One of the best in school history, maybe the best in school history.
Sure.
Steve Slayton was an NFL running back. Maryland pulled his scholarship offer because they thought they had better running backs on the roster, right? He ends up scorching Maryland for like 200 yards twice, I think, in his career. So, I mean, and it was James Franklin, by the way, who did that, who pulled his scholarship, and he's still mad about it today. But anyway, I find that funny. These guys are so competitive. But perfect examples of these. the Big 12, that's what makes and we'll get into some conference talk now. That's what makes the Big 12 so unique to me. You've got all these schools. There's so many similarities. You've got a bunch of non-blue blood programs who are all pretty much tiers to one another to a degree, who have to do more with less and have had to do more with less pretty much during their entire existence. And I think that's why it's such a even though geographically doesn't totally make sense, but I think there are so many. I think the Big 12 is a fun conference for that reason. Now it hurts us in other ways. We don't have the blue bloods because we don't get the TV ratings and we don't get the quote unquote big brands and all that. But it also creates a lot of fun games and some fun football and some really passionate, fun fan bases as well. Do you agree with that?
I do. Yeah. I think, look, well, haven't watched the American Conference for a bunch of years, right? That's certainly better than playing Temple and East Carolina every week. But I think that as you think about it, we do pick segments on our shows and stuff like that, right? And some of the games and other conferences are relatively easy. In the Big 12, anything can happen any Saturday. And I literally mean, you could tell me a score from any Saturday and say, hey, this team just beat this team by this much. And I'd be like, well, that makes sense, right? Because I feel like, to your point, there isn't a ton of people running away from the pack, right? There's a lot of parity, a lot of teams that are relatively similar. And it's really just about execution and key moments, getting lucky sometimes, Couz, who's on the road, right? Who's injured, and I don't know if you want to talk Big 12 officiating, but which referee throws which flag that day, right? And which rule we're enforcing on that week. And I think it does make it fun that you look at this conference every week and you say, I can make a case for either team beating each other. There are some teams that I thought UCF was better than that curb stomped us. There are teams that I didn't think we have any chance of winning, and all of a sudden we're in these games, we may win it, right? So I love the parity in the conference. I think it makes for a lot of fun. I can get from your Mark's perspective that he wants 2 and 3 conversations with his teams in the college football playoff. He wants people talking about it, right? And so it's tough because there is a bit of a cannibalization that I think at the higher level is challenging from a commissioner's perspective, right? But as a fan, week in and week out, Couz, it's a blast because you just never know who's going to win, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, Kansas sucks. All of a sudden Kansas is blowing somebody out the next week, and you're like, well, how did that happen? And there's never really any answers. It's just the only answer is it's the Big 12, man.
And what I think is really cool about the Big 12 fan bases is we all kind of, even though we go at each other on Saturdays and even during the offseason a little bit, when the Big 10 or especially the ACC or someone else starts talking junk, we all kind of we're like a bunch of hyenas, man, like a bunch of pack of wolves. We band together, right? We're the Big 12 because we feel like we've been kicked in the nuts, for lack of a better term, for so long, and we're all kind of UCF, BYU, Houston, Cincinnati. They all felt disrespected, felt like they should have been Power 4 programs all along, right? Then you've got schools like West Virginia who have been, have been turned down by some of these other conferences multiple times. And then you've got it's a conference. People can call it the band of misfit toys. And some look at that as a disrespectful term, but I actually think it kind of fits to a degree. I don't look at it. I look at it as a positive thing to a degree. But, call us the truck stop conference. That's because we're blue collar. We have a good work ethic, and our team's going to get out there and give it everything we got and may just beat your ass. I mean, that's, even though we're not supposed to. I mean, that's kind of how I embrace the Big 12 and look at it myself.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun for UCF fans. I mean, it's been a lot of fun going to new towns, meeting new fan bases, seeing new traditions, being in some of these games, and the topsy-turvy nature of like, hey, we could get just absolutely annihilated this week, but also annihilate somebody the next week. And it's been a lot of fun for UCF fans. I think they've really enjoyed, and I think you mentioned it, like the DNA of this conference probably fits UCF a little bit better than some of the other flashier conferences, right? Does everybody want in the SEC? Yeah, sure, maybe, right? Is the Big 10 good? Yeah, sure. But the DNA of what the Big 12 is, it's kind of UCF's DNA. Scrappy, underdog, fighting to get to the top. You're not gonna be the showiest thing on earth, but you're gonna be a damn solid team or program or school, right? And so I think a lot of the DNA of the Big 12 actually fits UCF, and I think the fans have enjoyed it. And I think it's been a lot more fun even than we imagined it would be.
Yeah, that's awesome. By the way, I did go to Orlando year before last.
Yep.
Enjoyed my time there. Beautiful campus, by the way. I really love the campus at UCF. My wife and I, other than the extreme heat we had to sit in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember I was there that day.
It was a little brutal.
Well,
But
listen,
other
you
than
all
that, we
we
enjoyed it.
still talk about that game because you all showed out. I mean, I think West Virginia dominated
Garrett
the
Green had a
stands
great
that
game
day.
that day.
Yes,
Yeah.
I mean your running back trio, Donaldson, Jaheim White. I mean, you guys ran all over
Yeah.
us in the second half. Just leaned
Mhm.
on UCF, and you're right. It was a good atmosphere. And again, we talk about it all the time. That was the one game where we looked around and said, okay, this is different. Like East Carolina brought like 12 people, right? Temple
Mhm.
brought like 13 people. I looked around, I was like, there's yellow everywhere, like
Yeah.
literally everywhere I told the story in the show. Because I'm a masochist, I stayed till the bitter end, even though we were getting blown out.
Yeah.
And so after the game, I'm leaving the stadium, me and my son, he's 12. So we decided to drop off in the bathroom real quick, right? Just to take a quick one for the road. And I get in the bathroom, Couz, and there's probably 50 West Virginia fans singing Country Roads in there.
Yeah.
And I was just like, unbelievable, like how well
Yeah.
that fan base traveled. And that's when I was like, man, this is not the American Conference, man. This is not us playing, Tulsa. Like this is different. And it was really the West Virginia fans that I think showed a lot of UCF fans what it's like to travel and support your team, and what a fervent fan base looks
Yeah.
like. And we're not there yet, frankly,
Right.
but that was a good model that day to see all
Yeah.
the blue and yellow inside the bounce house.
Yeah. Hopefully I'll make it back again in the future when UCF's, because you guys weren't having a great year, and not as many fans came out as I think normally would have, maybe.
Yeah.
Because I'd heard all the hullabaloo about the bounce house, and it wasn't that bouncy that day.
No.
But again, it was later in the season. You guys, and a lot of fans left early.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
But I bet you, if you guys are winning ball games like you did back in 2017, it's a whole different environment.
Yeah, when it's right, the bounce house is a pretty cool environment because it's pretty small, it's intimate. It doesn't have a ton of frills and bells and whistles. But people always ask all the time, does it bounce? It absolutely bounces.
Yes,
Like
it
that
does.
that place will
The
shake.
metal bleachers, man.
That place will shake
all.
if you get
It will.
rocking and rolling. But
And it did. I mean, it did shake some.
It does.
I'm not trying to be disrespectful at all.
well, you're not. I mean, you guys. I mean, there's nobody to shake in the second half. I mean, you guys ran us off the field that day.
It early on, it was a good atmosphere. I mean, the student section was loud, and there were quite a few students there, but they all left at like early third quarter. So, but I do think UCF has the makings with the size of the fan base. The size of the school, the size of the alumni base. I really think they got a chance to be a really, really top tier program for a long time if they can take advantage of it. I want to ask you one more thing, and I'll let you out of here. All the talk about the college football playoff potentially going to an automatic bid model, 4 from the SEC, 4 from the Big 10, Big 12, 2, ACC 2, one G5, and maybe one at large, probably Notre Dame. Do you like the idea of the Big 12 getting those 2 auto bids, or do you think they should fight against that? What are your initial thoughts?
That's a great question. I kind of go back and forth against the Couz, right? Because I think one of the things we talked about a lot on our show this year with the playoff is, to me, it just got criminally like thrown under the rug. We talk a lot about like who should have had a game and who should have been home, yada, yada, yada. What happened to BYU? We don't talk enough about BYU, just literally being like, never mind. And it just kind of got shoved to the side, and no one even mentioned it, right? So if you get to tell me I can protect a couple of spots and I can have some teams in there every year, and that sounds attractive to me. That sounds great to me, right? But you also say to yourself, why limit yourself to 2? If you have 3 great teams that can get in, I don't want to miss out on those 3 teams as well. So there's part of me that says what just happened to BYU this past season was criminally underreported and probably should have been a bigger discussion topic in the media. So if I can protect the 2, I'll take it. But I also don't want I don't want to be left to be thinking. I think the other thing I'd say is this way, and maybe this is just me being stubborn. I don't like the fact that we're going to allow the Big 10 and the SEC to grab the upper echelon, even though they may have great teams and they have a lot of talent. Don't get me wrong. But the fact that we're just going to guarantee them spots because they're these teams in these conferences, when you and I know that the 4th SEC team may be no better than the 3rd Big 12 team, right? But we're going to just let that team in and not let the Big 12 team in. So the stubborn person in me says, let's play it out. But I also look at what happened to BYU and said, that can't happen anymore, man. That can't happen again. And if I'm Brett Yormark, hopefully he's making a stink behind the scenes about how they got cut out of that. So I guess I talked myself into saying, no, I don't want it, just because I want it to be out in the field. I want it to be played out in the field, but I also don't want to continue to get, the little brother syndrome and have teams left out that maybe deserve a spot.
I kind of agree with you. My heart says no, you need to fight against it, because you're automatically, it's almost like you're admitting that, we're just not as good as those guys. But I also look at it from a realistic standpoint and say, you know what? I don't think they'll ever get more than one. Most years will not get more than one team in, and because of that perception, you know. And so maybe you should just take what they're willing to give you. And you know, if the SEC and Big Ten continue to throw their weight around and threaten to take their ball and go home, you know, do you call their bluff, or do you have to say, okay, we'll take our two teams? And I don't know. Brett Yormark's got a tough job, man. He really does have a tough job. I think he's the man for the job, and I really trust him to lead our conference. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. And you know, do they go the 4-4-2-2-1-1 14-team model, or you know, from 26 and beyond, or what do they do? So it'll be interesting.
Yeah. Again, I look, if you told me I had two spots, I'd take it, but there's just something about me that says, hey, let's play this thing out. Let's see how this works out. And you're right. I don't envy Yormark, and some of the things he has to fight against. And obviously with the SEC and the Big Ten sort of, you know, trying to continue to take more and more of a stranglehold on the conference. But I also have no confidence that whatever change you make in 26, they won't repeal in 27, right? It seems like every year there's something else that's coming up. So I think there also is a point of like, let's just try something and stick with it for a while, right? I get there's some tweaks that may have to happen with this last year's playoff and seeding and home games and some of that stuff, but we're going to play one of them and go, oh, well, that didn't work. Let's do another. Oh, that didn't work.
Really.
Let's figure out a model. Let's all stick to it. Let's play it out. And then let's look at some data after a couple of years and say, okay, let's think about how we make this better overall. And again, it's a tough spot to be, I think, in any of the college leadership positions, because every day there's a new lawsuit. Something's changing something, a house settlement, Title IX. I mean, it's just, I can barely keep up trying to report on it. I can only imagine having to actually understand and enforce these rules at a conference or a college. I don't even know how I would do that.
Agreed. Well, Adam, man, one more time, let the folks out there know where they can find you and your work.
Yeah, Sons of UCF, wherever you do your podcast, Sons of UCF on YouTube. We have a pretty robust channel. We have 3 to 4 shows out each week, some different hosts, different topics. So find our YouTube channel, give us a subscription if you don't mind that. Also hit up our website, sonsofUCF.com. Feature articles, stories, game previews, recaps, all that good stuff. If you want Sons of UCF coverage, we got you covered everywhere, Couz. So just find us wherever you do and type in Sons of UCF.
Awesome. Well, listen, Adam, man, thanks again for coming on the show. It's always fun to chat it up about the Big 12 and about, you know, catch up on what's going on and down in Orlando with the Knights and all that. So thanks again, man. And I look forward to hopefully doing this again sometime.
I appreciate it, Couz. Keep up the great work.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Adam as we covered all things UCF and Big 12 there. If you did, please hit the thumbs up button. It really helps that YouTube algorithm. Also, please subscribe to the channel if you're watching on YouTube. Leave a comment. Now, if you're listening to this on podcast platforms, we ask that you please leave us a 5-star rating. It really helps us out. Will help us get noticed by more people. We appreciate you tuning in to Couz's Corner. Want to say another thank you to our sponsors, BetUS Online and Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner Attorneys at Law. Thank them for helping me keep the lights on. If you're watching, please make sure to check out this video right here in the corner of your screen. YouTube says you'll like it. Hope the rest of your day's top shelf and Q Country Roads.